and say, I was beaten, I was locked in the bathroom, I was put in a dark room. He's not your fantasy child, and you are not a fantasy parent. This is not a Karan Johar movie that we're watching. What if my child starts loving the nanny more? What if my child starts loving my mother-in-law more than me? Our conditioning as Indian parents or Asian parents is very authoritative. I think that concept is so flawed. You find your inefficiencies in your child and you will then put labels because it's your trigger.
Yeah, tell me more.
It's an absolute no. That's the biggest mistake.
I saw a lot of parents struggling in terms of managing technology, social media. What is your advice for them?
It should definitely not be before the age of.
On your social media, you mention that everyone tells you how to raise a child,
Yes.
but no one tells you how to raise a parent.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
I'm so happy you asked this question because that was one of the biggest reasons why I wrote the book, The Parents I Met. And the reason I wrote that is because every time I went to a bookstore, I could only find, or I went to blogs, or I went to video, went through YouTube videos or whatever. Everybody said how to raise a successful child. Do this for your kids to listen. Talk like this so your kids will listen. And so many things, but nobody told me. And a parent is constantly, and I can tell you this, 99% of the parents are always second guessing, am I doing a good job? We're constantly second guessing. Because you have to understand, you're not going through a university or a degree to be a parent, right? It's something that is so intuitive to you and taking on a responsibility of raising another human. Like, I know people who are scared to take on to raise a pet, right? To take on to raise a human being is like a lifelong commitment. But nobody teaches you how to do that. You find the way your parents did it very archaic. You don't want to do that. You don't want to accept the Western world of doing it because as Indians, we are very, very rooted and we still don't want to let go of our roots. But we want those data points to be backed by science, like whatever else our ancestors or our grandparents are telling us. So now we are at this interesting cusp of saying, okay, how do I want to be as a parent? Also, we are, I think, as millennials, the first generation who understood that their parents didn't do everything right, or who remember our childhood very distinctly and say, I was beaten, or I was locked in the bathroom, I was put in a dark room, I was hit with a ruler on my knuckles when I didn't get a good grade. And we are the generation who's also raising children to know at the same time, you can't hit a child. Hitting a child is lifelong trauma. So we are in this sandwich fix of knowing the right and the wrong and dealing with our own trauma. And therefore, it was very important that if I have to raise a child today without the baggage of my childhood, I need to raise myself as a parent and then raise the child. And that's the biggest mistake we're making. Today, when I do a workshop on how to raise a good child or no screens for children, I will find a fully booked out workshop. But if I do a workshop on how to be a better parent, you'll see very few people who are very, very conscious and at a certain evolved level signing up because human nature is such that I don't believe I'm flawed. I don't think there's something wrong with me. I don't want to believe that I am flawed. We've always been taught to hide our flaws under the carpet, right? Or never talk about them openly. Or you will be judged if you talk about it, right? How many parents will come up and say that, I have a problem, I beat my child? You won't find anyone saying that.
Wow. And how do you think that is impacting today the way parents raise their kids, their maybe lack of self-awareness?
So I think, Rodrigo, the biggest mission that I want to work on is raising more conscious parents so that they can raise conscious children. And when I say raise conscious parents, is to be aware of my flaws, to be aware of my shortcomings, to be aware of what are my strengths, and to be aware that my child is not me. And the minute you kind of cut that cord. There's a reason why the umbilical cord is cut at birth, right? Because that person has his or her own life. You are just the nurturer. You've just been given the task of raising that child till the child can be independent. But what we do is we keep that cord so tight that sometimes it can choke the child, right? Like when the child is in the womb, if the umbilical cord is entangled around the child's neck, the doctor will operate an emergency and do a C-section, right? But when that happens after the child is out of the mother's womb, there is no umbilical cord cut off that time. Even if the child is feeling choked, there's no option. So the whole mission and the whole purpose is to elevate the parent to a certain level of consciousness, to know that your child is not your fantasy child. Your child does not need to confine to what society defines it as success or perfection or ideal life or, the best report card or the best gold medal. Those are defined by society, abided by people.
A lot of parents, they get information wherever they get from the family, they go on internet. What do you see is the biggest mistake that parents they do that has some maybe surprising negative impacts on the child?
It's a great question again. I think what people often forget is, and I keep saying this, you need to define your core values as a family, right? And you need to define what is important for you, right? Like it may be okay for friend A to have to eat dinner in his or her room. It may be okay for friend B to not live in a joint family system, or it may be okay for friend C to do something else, right? But I think one is to ensure that you define as a family what are your core values and how you can as a family stick by it. And I say this because you'll read so many things from the internet, right? What we're doing is we're collecting information, we're not assimilating information, and there's a huge difference, right? How can we ensure that what we are gathering as information is being assimilated, right? So I would say collect that information, but again, put it through a filter, like how you have water purifiers. Put it through the water purifier of your house, right? What of this can be adapted or filtered to suit your needs, right? So example, it could be screen time. Example, my kids have no screen time concept. They can watch as much TV as they want, right? Of course, that's derived over a period of time and a period of maturity and a period of understanding. I'm not saying that's a blanket rule for all children, but that's my core value. But example, if they did not respect somebody or there was disrespect towards people, place, or an animal or something, it would not go down through that filter. But that's my filter of my house. What's the water purifier for your house? That's very, very important.
At first, define what is important for you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then comes all the rest. But if you don't define the foundations, right, then it's difficult. Maybe what's your advice in terms of how to create that foundation for a parent to start off?
Yeah. So I think, again, that's a great question. And that'll come from you as parents and what you believe in and what your child is and what your child really, really wants, right? And it's so important to have that child as part of that decision making because more often, we want our children to have opinions, but we don't even give them the basic right to know, okay, would you want a pink in your room or would you want a blue or do you want a yellow? Or do you want a wallpaper or do you want a paint? No, that's not even a question that a child is asked, right? Which car do you want to buy? Do you like this car? Do you want a white car? Do you want a red car, right? Simple decision making. Would you want aloo paratha for dinner or would you want palak paneer for dinner, right? Our conditioning as Indian parents or Asian parents is very authoritative, right? We've always been asked to look down upon children because there is an age gap. I think that concept is so flawed because when we were growing up, it was always, you want to eat this or starve, right? I mean, I was very lucky that wasn't the case in my family, but typically a lot of Asian or Indian families will have that concept. But why can't you say, why don't you eat this today? What you want to eat, we can make that tomorrow. It's just suddenly putting your child and you as equals, right? Versus a very hierarchical parent-child relationship. And why does this come back to the foundation? Is because that child also needs to be part of that foundation from a very, very early on, right? So if our core values as a family is that, okay, we're going to be respectful, we're going to be honest. Truth is a very important part of our family. Like you can get away with everything, you can't get away with dishonesty, right? And such a simple thing, right? My daughter just came back from a camp the other day, and she said, so her younger sister borrowed her jacket, and she said, she borrowed my jacket without asking me. And I said, yeah, sorry. She said, you could have asked me. I said, you weren't available. And she's like, you guys cannot lie to me. You can do everything, but you cannot lie to me. And suddenly, Rajika, I was just thinking of myself, oh my God, these foundational values are, it was just a jacket. She said, but she cannot lie to me that she didn't wear it. I'm okay with lending it, but you can't lie to me. And she said it 3 or 4 times. And for a moment, I said, wow. So parenting done right, it does not come to you in very obvious ways of an A star, A star in truth, and A star in honesty and whatever. It comes to you in so many reflections, which are very day to day.
But what I found also interesting is that you mentioned about the cultural aspect and how it impacts. Maybe you can share a little bit about how does the Indian society works and how does that impacts the way parents raise children.
Yeah. So Indians, while we are seeing a lot of parents now raise children in nuclear families, but Indians by nature, we find it very hard to say no, right? We find it very hard to draw boundaries, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's with family. We find it very hard to say, I would like to do this my way. And I think sometimes, the Indian yes, right? Like this, which we don't know means a yes or a no, kind of is actually the right example of this, because we don't know how to say no. So if my mother-in-law will say, I am giving her a chocolate, I'll be like, I don't want, what does this mean? I don't want you to, but I'm reluctantly saying yes because I don't have the courage to say no. But why can't I say, and I think that's the problem. We don't say what we mean. We often say it mean, right? Then we don't say it when we meant to say it. And then it reaches a point of like, I'm drowning. And then I want to say it out. And then it doesn't come out in the form that we want to say it in, right? So, and the reason I say is that there'll be very few people like me who come from a very privileged background. And I say privileged because I have a very beautiful relationship with my extended family. And if I had to raise my children all over again, I would still do it in a joint family system. Was because I have a very beautiful relationship. Did it happen in one day? No, it did not. Does it lend itself to raising your children in a very secure manner? Yes, it does. But it comes with boundaries. It comes with boundaries of saying, I am the parent. There is only one driver of this boat, and that is me. It also comes with, okay, these are all the permissions that I can give and nobody else can. And you have to say it up front. You have to say it without the frills and fancies, which we often lace it with. Yes, you can do that, but, and no. She needs permission. I'm the only person who will give permission, right? What are you ready to let go of, right? So yes, there may be an occasional treat. Yes, there may be an occasional way of watching them a little bit of extra screen time. Yes, there may be an indulgence, whatever else that because grandparents or extended family like to indulge, right? But are you ready to let go of that? Because what's your trade-off? Because I've always been a full-time working mom, Rodrigo. And for me, there was always this trade-off, right? Either I show up at work and therefore trust the person who's raising my child. And I said, yes, I trust the person. And I think a lot of parents make that mistake that they do not want to let go of authority They rather let go of the authority to a nanny versus a grandparent. And I think sometimes that's a mistake we're making because we're fighting for equality. We're fighting for insecurity. We are worried that she will have an upper hand over my child. Like, how much can a child love a nanny? The child can never love a nanny more than me as a parent. So you're playing this pleasure for chair, right? For the lack of better word. But you're not understanding that you're letting your child miss out on a grandparent's affection versus caretaking by a nanny. And I'm not saying that's for everyone. And we're not generalizing it, because if you don't have grandparents around, you don't have family around, what do you really do? But I think it's sometimes often that the ego steps in where you're not ready to let go of. I know so many parents who write to us on Kidsstoppress and say, I am not ready to go back to work because what if my child starts loving the nanny more? What if my child starts loving my mother-in-law more than me? And we are insecure as human beings. We are. Because let's remember that the child's love is the most selfless form of love that you will ever experience. Nobody will love you whether you're fat or thin, or I'm not body shaming here, but or tall or short or dark or fair or rich or poor, the way a child will love you back, because child loves you for who you are. And they don't know the extended world. They don't know what is rich. They don't know what is poor. They don't know that there are skin types or skin colors or body forms. So they love you because that's the only form of love they know. That's the only other person that they know. So I think this ego battle that we often play in Indian families, I think if that was kind of just put to rest, I think the child will flourish a lot more.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot. Of course, parents, they have insecurities, right? And so they take some decisions based on what they learn in the past. What are some behaviors that parents they have that might not translate into a good impact on the children that maybe parents are not aware?
I think one is burdening of expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Burdening of unfulfilled desires, right? And what I mean is that more often than not, we see a lot of parents operating from a place of deficit mindset. What I mean by deficit mindset is it was my shortcoming. You'll often see a person who could not speak very well, or was scared to speak, or was always called, oh my God, you can't even talk. They will overcompensate with their child in making sure that the child is public speaking, or, if the child is not being able to do that, you find your inefficiencies in your child, and you will then put labels because it's your trigger.
Oh.
Right? Every time that parents get angry, most of the time, I always tell them, write down why you're angry. More often than not, you're always angry because you're unable to deal with your inefficiencies as a human being. That's why you get angry. And the recipient of that, in all likelihood, is your child, because he cannot give it back to you. Try doing that with your spouse. Try doing that with somebody at work. Try doing that with a taxi wala who comes. He'll give it back to you, like slam dunk, and you'll be done. But your child, unfortunately, cannot give it back. And that becomes his pattern. I cannot give it back. I cannot give it back. I cannot give it back. Come when the child is 18 and he's at school, or he's at high school, he's away from family, that child is going to struggle to give it back because that's become his pattern. He was unable to speak. So that's the impact that you are creating, right? A lot of parents come to me and say, Mansi, but my child lies. I said, what was your last reaction when your child came up to you and said, this is my truth? I couldn't accept it. I said, just get out. Or, I just negated that conversation. And then we're saying, okay, my child committed suicide, or my child, left the house, or my child has anxiety problems. But when was the last time you embraced your child for who they are? So even in the book, Rodrigo, I talk to Sushant Divjikar's parents, who at 18 came out of the closet and told his dad, I'm gay. And his dad gave him the tightest hug of his life.
Wow.
And that was such an important chapter for me to have in the book, because we've never had these conversations with our parents, right? Like gender fluidity, sexual preferences, they were not conversations that we had with our parents, especially as Indian families. It wasn't even a thing. So you're like, okay, I didn't even know my parents didn't know how to deal with it. How am I going to deal with it? These are still conversations that we want to have within closed doors. So imagine if your child came up to you. Yes, it may not be something that may be your first preference, but your child is not wrong in what he or she are feeling, right? Acknowledging of what they're feeling. If your child says, I just don't feel like I can, there's a difference between pushing your child to drive to his potential and pushing your child to drive your potential.
Whew. Yeah, tell me more.
So I'm saying more often than not, we're accelerating on the wrong path. We want our child to reach, or let me rephrase, I want my child to reach where I couldn't. That's the mistake that we're constantly making, right? Like, I can tell you some of my triggers. Like, I mean, I know for a fact that, I was, as a child, my teachers never put me up in the front row because I had these really thick glasses and they said, you can't speak. And now I do that for a living, so I don't know where she was coming from. But I know I was conscious and I was constantly put back in the last row where I was like either holding a tree or something, and I was not seen, right? And I know today when my daughter has glasses and she faces the same issue, I want to come back stronger to saying that, you know what, this is a limiting belief. Having glasses or having braces, and what children are going through these days, or having body hair or having anything, these are limiting factors to a child's true potential, right? So for me, I just want every parent to know that your child does not need to be you. You can be a super achiever. Your child does not need to be. He's not your fantasy child, and you are not a fantasy parent. This is not a Karan Johar movie that we're watching, right? Which I think is the biggest mistake that we're making. And social media has just made it so amplified that now, earlier you were judging your, like we were judged against, oh, my neighbor's child came first in 10th standard. Now I'm judging against this girl in Patna who came first. Like, I'm telling my child, Arey, you are not coming first. Look at that girl. She's a watchman's daughter and she's come first. But what circumstances? What was the child's aptitude? What did he or she, maybe she loved math. Maybe she did whatever else that there was, right? Maybe she just loves studying. That's what she wants to do. Maybe your child doesn't. So now you're comparing your child to strangers, right? So it's so hypocritical of us as parents to say that, oh, I don't pressurize my child. I just don't do it. I let them do whatever they want.
You mentioned a lot of different parts. There's one which I would like to unpack a bit more, which also I was impacted. I think my mom did that exactly. So she was pushing me to do what she just thought was the best for me. Yeah, and I know that she was doing that from a place of love.
Yes.
But it is true that she was not listening to what I wanted.
Yeah.
So there's always this balance between what the parents want for the kids, versus what is the best for the kids.
Yeah.
And I think it's not an easy balance.
Yeah.
Do you know someone or any story, or what's your advice to balance this?
It is such a great question, and it's such a conflicted space, right? Love versus discipline, love versus interest, right? And again, I come back to the book, is because this was a very important part that I was constantly as a child pitted against my eldest sister, and she was a super achiever, and she was always very good in math, and she would crack every competitive exam, and for me, I just didn't want to be her. Not because I couldn't be her, because my parents wanted me to be her. And I was like, why? Like, why do I need to be someone else? And I come back to the book because as a parent, it's important to know when to let go of. Like I said, it's a very, very, very thin rope, right? Like PV Sindhu and her sister. PV Sindhu's an Olympian and she's going to compete in the Paris Olympics as well. World badminton champion, Olympian. So she and her sister used to train every single morning, 4 a.m. together. And when I interviewed Mr. Sindhu, PV's father, and he said, Mansi, I gave both the girls the exact same things, right? PV didn't make any excuses waking up at 4. She did not say stop. And my elder one said stop. And there was this moment where she said, I don't want to do it. And today she is a doctor and she's, a gynecologist in the US. And she's doing very, very well for herself. She's not PV Sindhu, but that's okay. So as a parent, yes, you are operating from a space of love, 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 but you need to understand that the minute that love becomes overpowering, it becomes something that you do not want, that gets suffocating for your child, he or she will snap, right? He or she will say, this is not what I want to do. Again, another example, coming back to Andre Agassi, right? If the father didn't push, maybe Andre wouldn't have been the tennis star that he is. But he still regrets. And if you read his biography, he still, for everything that he's achieved, he still misses that traumatic childhood that he had, right? If you've seen Roger Federer's documentary, his parents played a very, very pivotal role in, and any sports star, because you cannot do that level of commitment without the parent. But I think it's very important to know when to stop. And I'll give you my own example. My daughter was playing the cello till she was about 9 or 10. Rodrigo, I was so invested. She started playing at the age of about 6, 7. And everybody would tell me, oh my God, what long, beautiful fingers. She's born to be an artist. She's meant to be a cellist. And I was like, wow. And as Indians, I've heard of the sitar and the tabla and the flute. I've never heard of the cello. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. I was so invested that I found it so hard the day she decided, I don't want to do this. Because she got a Russian teacher and the teacher was very harsh and very mean. And, they have versus a Polish teacher who she had earlier who was very like, okay, cultivating love for the subject. There's no race to compete. But the Russian teacher was like, you got to do this. You're not good enough. And it threw her back so much that she decided to quit the instrument. I was so invested as a parent that I'm like, you can't do this. And I didn't understand music. So I would literally sit within her in class, try to understand music and try to make her do that practice again. I was so invested. And then when I had to pull the plug on it, it broke my heart. I don't know if I made the right decision. I don't know if I made the wrong decision. But I know one thing for sure. My daughter is happier. Could she have been a better cellist? Could it have played out today when she's 15 and she would regret that she's not learned a musical instrument?
Yeah.
Maybe. But she was happy at that point in time. And as parents, we often feel like, and I'll say this in Hindi, and I'm sure you'll follow, like, ab nahi to kabhi nahi, right? If not now, it'll never happen. That's not the truth. That's the biggest mistake. If she ever decides to pick up the cello again, she has 50, 60, 70 more years ahead of her. She can pick it up then if she wants to ever go back to it. But we always believe that no, if it's not now, it's never. But that's really not the truth. Because sometimes, like I said, parenting is really sometimes seeing your child walk into a glass wall, fully aware that they're going to bang their head, they're going to regret it, but you just have to be there to catch them when they fall and not regret it yourself.
Yeah. So what you say is like you really need to see when you need to let go, right?
Yeah.
But you said something very interesting, which is when a lot of times love becomes overpowering. Yeah, can you give it some examples when that parents might be facing that and they don't know? What are some instances that parents might be doing that, but they're
Yeah.
not aware?
It could be, like I said, it's about, more often than not, it's about the tangibles, right? Grades, marks, medals, competitions, right? We are always training our kids to win, right? We're not training them to enjoy, right? And I think that's when love has stepped back and a mission has set in, right? Like I find it so weird when I ask parents, and I asked this to Pulela Gopichand, the Indian badminton coach, when I'd interviewed him. I said, "What is success?" Right? And he had said that, "Mansi, success is not how many medals you win, but it's the number of lives that you touch." And it's never about the medals. It's about the journey. It's about the process. It's about waking up every single day at 4 a.m. and showing up on court. What that teaches you is not what the medals are going to teach your child alone, right? Medals can be a part of it. It's not the whole of it. So I think when parents forget that it's love versus the tangibles, I think that's the time to realize that I am overstepping on love. I'm using love as a shield when actually it's not. And I think that comes as acceptance. Like, are you ready to accept that and have that conversation with yourself?
Yeah, and it's also about understanding that, oh, this might be more about me, what I want, than what is the best for the kid.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Wow, really good. So you talk about success, and very interesting. I heard, there's a Vishen Lakiani from Mind Valley. He said something very interesting. He said before he used to have this goal for his children, which is, I want to be close to them. As a father, I want to be close to them. But then you start to realize that's not maybe the best goal to have. Maybe because one day they're going to leave, they're going to go to university, and I'll get frustrated. They will get frustrated. He said he reframed it into, I want to be the best father that I can be every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was a reframe. Right? So maybe you can tell us, like, what are some, how can we redefine what is success to become a parent?
I keep saying this line, and I've said this over the last 10 years at Kidsstoppress, that you are the best parent your child can ever have. Because we need to understand everybody's circumstances, the cards that they've been dealt are very different. Right? In one of my talks in Bangalore, I met this 23 or 24-year-old, and he hates his parents. First up, I asked him, why are you at my book launch, right? I said, I've typically had parents attending it and a lot of school children, so why are you attending? And he's like, because I hate my parents. And I was like, why? So he said, because I didn't make it to IIT, and they thought it was like, I'm a loser because I can't be who they want me to be. And I was like, you need to understand that they're coming from only so much wisdom, so much knowledge, not even wisdom. They're operating from that space of lack of consciousness and lack of knowledge. I said, if they had the knowledge, they wouldn't be operating. But you are operating from a place of knowledge, right? Your job is to know that they are not, and therefore forgive them.
Wow.
Right? I said, if you are so wise, why can't you forgive their ignorance that today making to IIT is not the only benchmark of success? I said, they're coming from that place of, if my child goes to IIT, my child will have. Right? Can you change that for them and say, even if my child didn't go to IIT, my child has. Right? It will change the dynamics between you and your child. So I always feel that it's very easy for us to go back and blame our parents. But we need to understand that they came from a very limited set of bandwidth, knowledge, information. And that's why they played the best game they knew with the cards that they had. You play your best bet now. And that's why I always keep saying that don't judge other parents. Elevate them, empower them, because they're operating from a very limited level of knowledge and consciousness. So the first rule of being a conscious parenting coach is to not judge the other parent, because they're not at that same level. If they were, they would be operating, you would need to correct them, right? So I always say this, you are the best parent you can be to your child today. Just like Vishen said. Today, now is what you have. I don't want to look into the future. I don't want to look into the past, because then I'm not in the moment. And I want to be in the moment. I want to do my best today.
Yeah, I really like that. So you mentioned about consciousness, right? So the importance of raising parents' consciousness. Like, what can parents do to raise their level of consciousness that will help them, as in their journey as a parent, but also their children, the way they raise their children?
It's a long process. But
we have time, just go ahead.
It's a long process, but the first step is to identify that I need work. I am not perfect, right? If you start just assuming that I don't need work, I don't think I'm perfect. Because if I start believing that, I will stop growing, right? What I was when I started 10 years ago, am I the same Mansi today? I'm definitely not. Am I the same parent today? No. Am I the same business person today? No. So evolution is constant, and the ability to adapt and evolve is very important. So that's one. Second is to know that, to identify your triggers, weaknesses, and strengths, and how to deal with that trigger, right? So if you start identifying those, and starting to write down what gets you angry, what gets you upset, what triggers you, what makes you happy, what are the different emotions every time you experience a band of emotions. If you just start writing what caused that, it'll make a world of a difference, because you will be more aware about what is causing that, right? So you will never see me overtly happy or overtly sad, or you can't have emotions that are this. Emotions need to be this. So this is the ultimate goal. Like, nothing can take you right up here and nothing can bring you down here. There are very few life moments. Maybe it's the birth of a child, or it's the death of a parent, that can really take you to those highs and lows. And I think perhaps that is still a valid emotion. But achieving X or achieving Y or reaching a social count of constant. So identifying all of those emotions and what gets you there is important. Understanding that your child is not you is important. Okay? Attachment is, my husband hates this about me, but I'm a fairly detached parent. He sometimes finds it very surprising. So both my kids were at camp for almost 4 weeks with zero contact, zero phone, zero connection. And he's like, how are you so zen? I was like, because this is going to be the future. And I know that I've raised capable individuals who will, and she was all of 10. One was all of 10, one was all of 14. And I said, I know I've raised capable individuals. They will know how to fight for themselves. They know how to fend for themselves. They know survival skills. And I know that if there is a moment that I need to be contacted for, I will be the first person they will reach out to. So coming from a space of detachment, and why is that detachment important? Because, again, coming to that equilibrium, her report card is not my high, and her not getting an A star is not my low. It's hers, right? She has to deal with the consequences of that. If she doesn't want to study, she has to deal with it, right? I can only guide. And like the Bhagavad Gita says, why did Krishna not fight the battle for Arjun? He didn't do it. He just said, I'm going to be your Sarthi, right? I'm going to be your guide. I'm going to be the one who will lead you, but I'm not going to fight your battles. The minute a parent starts identifying that I am Krishna and I am not Arjun, that would change the game. And I actually share that into the introduction because of my book, because I think we want to take over the reins and start riding, and we want to make all those, kill all the Kauravas because we want to fight for our child. No. The minute you're doing that, you are making your child more handicapped. And that process, Rodrigo, is not one day, it's not 2 days. It's a lot of work, right? And it is about finding the right coach. It is about reflection. It is about meditation. It is about journaling. It is about taking a step back and reflecting back on that moment. It is spending a lot more time with yourself. It is about enjoying your own company.
Basically, what you're saying is that they need to go on this personal development journey. They need to work on themselves.
Yes.
Now, my question is and how to bring the children in that journey with them?
Mm-hmm. It's very hard. Like if I had to create a plug and play model of how I did it, so many people have asked me that, and it's so hard for me to say I did this. It's so hard to say this was my rule book, because honestly, Rodrigo, there was no rule book when I started. I was literally the first parenting influencer in the country. I had no rule book to play by. I did not even know the rules of the game, right? I did not know who to role model. I had no highways to cross. And I really didn't know, I didn't even have a role model parent. When I say that, it's not my parents, but somebody you'd look up. Like today, if you want to be anybody, if you want to be a fashion influencer, you have somebody. If you want to be a public speaker, you have somebody. If you want to be a politician, you have somebody to look forward to. When we were growing up, the world was so closed, right? Like we didn't have, like my role model was Steffi Graf. Like I loved Steffi Graf, right? Like I still do. I absolutely still do. But our role models were so limited, right? They were either film stars or sports stars or maybe like, if I think back, because I was born then, was maybe Indira Gandhi, right? She was probably the strongest world leader we knew about. But today that's not the case. Our kids have so many. So to the point that not having that access, today if I have to really put it down, I think I did not isolate myself as a parent to Mansi, the woman, the mother, the daughter-in-law. My kids were just always part of every journey that I walked on, right? So if they saw me taking care of my mom, or they saw me taking care of the house, or they saw me being a working woman, or my children have attended so many meetings alongside me, like I would literally take them to a coffee shop because I didn't have help. I would just take them, I put them with a book on another table. I would conduct a meeting on this table. And back in the day, we didn't have the sophisticated Starbucks. We still had cafe coffee day. And I would do that. And they sat there reading a book without a treat, right? They didn't know anything better, right? I mean, I've taken flights and flights and flights with my kids with no iPad, because there was no iPad back then. So they've just adapted to the process, because they've had no, like in lack of words, they've not had too much of a choice but to adapt and to be, because of the journey that I had to take. They were just always part of the process. And I think just observing constantly and role modeling very subconsciously, right? Like you're not active, it's not active role modeling. Like, oh, I need to be perfect, my kids are around. No.
Yeah.
It's not active role modeling. It's just part of the process, right? It's never been about what can you do, right? It's about always what can we do, right? Whether it was holidays, whether it was working, whether it was having a second child. I think or just them seeing me exercise every single day, whether they was 1 day old or they're 15 today, they've not seen an alternative to that. They've not seen as, oh, this is taking my mom away from me. This is part of who she is, right?
Yeah, and what I like it, and if I bring how we started the conversation, what I think you also did was you defined really clearly what was your values, what
Yeah.
were your values.
Yeah.
And then you lived your values, and you also didn't separate who is Mansi or who is the mother.
Yeah.
There's only one person.
Yeah.
And then you brought them in that journey with you,
Yeah.
right? Being yourself,
Yeah.
and naturally you were role modeling for them, right?
Yeah.
And also they felt part of the journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's really, 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 really good.
And parenting, Rodrigo, is not about the moments that you are with them. That's the test of time. It's the moments when you're without them, when they're out in the world alone, that will be your true test of time, right? Like you will know, like I said, there's not a report card of trust A star, this B, whatever. It's about the moments that they are away from you when you will know, are they ready for life, right? And that's your role as a parent, to make them individual, independent, and people who can stand on their feet tomorrow, like independent individuals.
Yeah.
If you've done that, you've done your part well.
Yeah, and that's what we were mentioning before. Sometimes you are detached because you felt that you did your work before, and now it's just about, okay, let them learn, and you know that you did your best, right? And now they will also do their best.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like that. But being a parent sometimes can be overwhelming.
Yes.
And then you started also this conversation saying that a lot of parents, they feel that sometimes I'm not enough, or I'm not enough. And when I was also researching for our conversation, that came as the first thing that parents are ashamed to ask themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So for parents who feel I might not be enough as a parent, what is your advice to them?
It is okay. It is okay to not be. I don't think I'm enough, but I ask for help, right? And parenting today is a lonely job, because we're living in more and more nuclear families. Parenting today is causing burnout because we're all running a race, and there is just so much information, right? Like there is paradox of information, and I cannot be everywhere. Like it is extremely overwhelming because I am confused. I don't know which board to choose. I don't know the decision making starts from as early as getting pregnant. What's the right age? When should I have a baby? What if something happens to my career? What if I lose my job? Will I have a girl or a boy? Oh my God, I had a boy. Oh my God, I had a girl. Okay, should they go, what age should I start preschool? What age should I start, which board of schooling should I take for my child? Oh my God, like my child is crying, other children are not crying. You are in this constant phase of overwhelm, right? Constant phase of information, right? But I think that time is so important to somewhere just cut out the noise, trust 2 or 3 people, and say, you know what, all this is great, but intuitively, what does your gut say, right? I just feel like your gut is your GPS, right? Like it just navigates you. And I think parents are born, especially mothers, and I hate to negate the fathers, but I do feel women in general as a gender, we're so intuitive. We just know it. Like we just know that something's off, something's not feeling right. Our sixth sense, maybe because we're women and we're constantly, especially as Indian women, we're taught to have a very strong sixth sense because, something can do something to you, or somebody somewhere can say something to you. We're very receptive. So I just feel as mothers, we're so intuitive. You just as a parent, never lose that instinct, because parenting is a lot of instinct, but coming from information. So sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'm going to learn, right? don't operate from that mindset, Are my dad did this, our parents did this, we grew up like this. You have to stop saying that. Because that's a very linear way of thinking. Right? Parenting today is not linear. Right? So I think and a conscious parent is someone who bridges the gap between linear, punitive, intrinsic sort of education, right? Because you're constantly bridging this gap of information and action. And do what feels right to you. Don't listen to everybody. And know your child. Keep your child at the epicenter of everything. Because what may work for one child may not work for another child, right? And it's okay. It is okay. So that's why I tell parents, please listen to your gut. Please listen to your child. Please listen to your instincts. Because it will always, I always feel when in doubt, listen to your child. Because I think they're always telling you the truth. They'll help you navigate things so easily.
So what you're saying is like there's so much information. You gather your information, but ultimately you need to know what is your gut telling you, and trust that you will make the best decision.
Absolutely.
Right? And feel good with that, independently what is the decision or what are the impacts.
Yeah.
I really like that. And now if we look ahead, like there's so many, I mean, today the world is changing so fast. Did you see any example of any parents who are maybe raising their kids in a more unconventional or unique way that you found inspiring and you would like to share?
I think every parent today is dealing and playing their best bet with the cards that they've been dealt with, right? I'll give you an example from the book. There's this mentalist, Suhani Shah. Her parents pulled her out of school in grade 2 because Suhani was extremely smart. She learned magic on her own just watching TV, fairly independent. She learned tables like that. She would understand the logic of it. Extremely intuitive, right? And they pulled their child out of school at grade 2 for her to be a magician, for her to be a mentalist. To me, I couldn't for the longest time wrap my head around how can parents 25 years ago have that courage. I know I don't have it today. But these parents had it 25 years ago. How? Like, what happened if she couldn't go back to conventional school, right? And I'm saying this 25 years ago. Today, taking a gap year is not such a big deal. Taking 2 years off is not such a big deal, but parents still fear that. But what would have her parents thought that they decided to do that? Or if I look at, I look at again Priyanka Chopra's example, when she came back from Boston and her mom saw that she was struggling in grade 10, because she learned a different system and now she had to adapt to a different system. And when she came back, her parents said, it's okay, if you can't manage, take a gap year. And in the process, of course, Miss India happened and whatever else happened. But I think just to take that pause and sometimes listen to your child, I think is just so important. And I think we're not trained as human beings, and especially as parents, to listen. We're just trained to instruct.
Yeah.
Right? Again, it comes down to that hierarchy and authoritative style of being, right? Like our parents spoke to us, so we can never bridge that gap and say, I will speak to my child at the same level, right? Reasoning was never such a big deal. Like, I told you so. That was always, you have to do what I tell you. That was always the approach, versus, can we have a conversation, right? Which is the other way of saying it. Yes, there are boundaries to be drawn, and say that, okay, this is unsafe and this is safe. I would not want you to walk across to the other side. It can be dangerous. And I talk about this a lot, especially on social media, where parents today are so wary of their kids getting onto social media at a very early on. And I say, and it's a large part of the conversations we're driving today, right? And I keep telling parents that if you think that they're not going to do it, you're mistaken, right? They're probably doing it and you don't know. And that's why you're in this oblivion, feeling very, very happy. नहीं मेरा बेटा तो नहीं है, मेरे बच्चे ने तो कुछ नहीं किया है, right? That's what it is. But you're living in oblivion because your child's actually doing it and you're unaware. What's a better bet? You sit down and say, okay, you can have it. These are the boundaries around it. I need to have access. I'm going to access parental supervision on a particular social tool. We have a conversation, right? And we discuss, oh, what did this one do on Instagram today? Oh, what did this one post? What was her snap streak like, right? Let's get part of the conversation. And I'm not saying give it to them early. Give it to an age that is, again, comfortable to your water filter in your house. And I keep coming back to that water filter example. So whatever is okay in your house. But if you think that it's not happening, it's not true. But how can you work and explain to them? How can you start having conversations versus conflicts? Right?
Yeah. I think this point, maybe we can just do it again because I think it's such an important one. I think on social media, I saw a lot of parents struggling in terms of managing technology, devices, social media. What is your advice for them?
So like I said, Rodrigo, that it's important to understand that it's a necessary tool. Let's understand why social media is important. Social media is important for connection, community, conversations. And social media is important because now it's become a distribution mechanism. It's a one-to-many distribution mechanism, right? We all are aware of the importance of it, right? Today, it's made the world a boundaryless space. Understood. What are the other sides of it? You're comparing yourself with strangers. You are believing what may not be reality. You're up for danger from messaging from strangers who may not be the right people, right? And these are just a few of them, and there could be many negatives as well. But if these are the 3 or 4 that, and of course it's a black hole. Sometimes you're going down endless scroll. So how can we deal with this necessary evil? First, let's decide what is the age that you and your child mutually decide that we're going to get a social media app or technology for your child. It should definitely not be before the age of 13. It's an absolute no. And most social media apps restrict the age and they say 13 upwards. If you can delay it, you can make it 14, 15, 16. It's an ideal case. Hypothetically, you cannot for whatever reason. There is pressure, the class decides, all the class parents decide, okay, that, we want social media at, you can do it at a class level where you can say as a class, we'll say, no child in the class gets social media before the age of 15. Ideal scenario, if that happens, great. If that does not happen, what can you do? One, can you make your child very conscious of the amount of time? It will come to you, it will come with boundaries. What's the time limit should we set? 10 minutes every day? 15 minutes every day? That's about it. So it will come to you, it will come to you with boundaries, right? All of these social media apps already have family tools and family centers that help you as parents navigate some of the evils of it, right? So example, you can block comments, you can see if, most children are supposed to have private accounts. If a stranger is sending requests, you don't need to accept it. You may discuss with your parent, who is this person, right? Do I need to accept? Do I not need to accept? If you're getting any DMs, have that conversation with your parents. If your child has restricted a few accounts, can you talk, you will get a notification that this child has restricted this account. So can you work within that framework that these apps are providing and saying, okay, I need to be part of this. And today, at least Instagram has that, where you can have parental supervision tools on where the child's account, and you don't get to see the DMs of the child or any of that, but you can get these red flags. So can we do that? The third part of it is to get your child aware. So, if you're using the iOS ecosystem, can you make sure that the child's account is added as a minor's account? So make sure that you can control the screen time of it. And make sure that you're discussing the screen time with your child as well, right? You've spent, and empower them for decision. You've spent 45 minutes today just scrolling. What else could you do? You spend 2 hours on WhatsApp. What else could you do, right? Make sure that they're playing adequate sports, because I truly believe there is no mental health without physical health. Because kids are, and human beings are supposed to move. We are meant for movement, right? So make sure that they are part of some sort of physical sport, activity, exercise that keeps their minds and hands off a device at any point in time.
Yeah, and what I like, I mean, you give a lot of tips, but what I like is, again, you need to be with them in their journey, listening and having conversations in that journey. So
Absolutely.
that also you empower them.
Yeah.
Right? I really like them. Maybe you can give us like 3 books that you recommend, more for new parents. What are the 3 books?
I would definitely say one must read The Conscious Parenting by Dr. Shefali. I'm a huge advocate of her work. I think she's absolutely brilliant. The second one I would say is Dr. Becky's book, Good Inside. I think is really good. And the third, how can I not say? You read The Parents I Met, right? Which is by Mansi Zaveri, which is an absolute must read, because I think it provides a lot of insights into the Indian way of parenting, because we've never had Indian parents write books. We've had a very Western culture or Western influence of how to raise children. But probably The Parents I Met is the only Indian parenting book that I've read, which gives me parents who've dealt with similar situations, similar circumstances, similar social, cultural, physical landscape. And I just feel like these human libraries need to be accessed, and we need to go through these archives a lot more than what they have been, because I just feel like there's so much wisdom out there that I feel it'd be very, very interesting. And of course, I think fourth, I must say, is the Bhagavad Gita. I think it has phenomenal anecdotes and life lessons to every part of life that you are actually struggling with.
Agree. Yeah. In your social media, also you mentioned an inspiration like Ambani.
Yes.
What can we learn from the way he raised his kids?
I think, again, it might be interesting to see how, just see how he's, just made the name grow so much, right? It's become so aspirational. It's become so conversational. He's put his children on a world map today. He's made time for what is important. And I must give you this example. So once I was at this temple at Babulnath, and because we're from the same community, I was at this temple at Babulnath, and I struggle to go to the temple. I have to confess. Like, I am a spiritual person. I may not be a very religious person, but I just said that I have to go to the temple, and I'm going to go. And I was there, and the temple was shut down for some moments, and I just went in. And after I finished praying, and I just turned left to ring the bell, and I saw, Mukesh Ambani right there praying. And, for 30 seconds, I just thought to myself, Rodrigo, this man has the biggest temple in his house. He has the biggest, shrine or whatever in his house. Why does he need to come here to pray and bow and take the effort? And why am I constantly finding excuses, right? And to me, that moment was very surreal, because I feel that these values of who you are can, again, act, it's role modeling, right?
Yeah.
For them, everything begins very spiritually, very religiously. We know they're men. They celebrate a whole bunch of festivals, not being ashamed of who you are. They don't as again, being part of the same community, we say Jai Shri Krishna, right? To say it, you don't need to feel shy, right? You don't need to, I say to everybody who leaves the house, we say it. To everybody at bedtime, we say it. And even if my kids are abroad, with their friends, we'll still say it, right? Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your culture. Be proud to pass on to the values that you are proud of, no matter which part of the world you are in. I think that, to me, is extremely, inspiring. That don't be afraid of your individuality. Don't be afraid of who you are, what you can bring to the table. Don't be scared to say today that you're an Indian, right? I think for everything else that the world is talking about, I think I find these moments very, very special, because if he can be whoever he is and find time to come bow his head in front of the Almighty, and it could be whoever it is for you, but if he can make that time, so can you, right?
Yeah.
To me, that was special.
Very good. Okay, so we're coming to the end, and just one last question is, what is the one message that you would love people to get out of this conversation?
Your child is not always wrong. Learn to look at things from your child's lens and perspective. And of course, treat your children as equals.
So good. I'm really happy that we had this conversation, and I'm happy that we focus on being a parent rather than the success of the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what parenting teaches you, I think I am a much better human being today than I was without my kids. So I think parenting definitely makes you a better human being, because you finally learn to love somebody more than yourself. So I think it's a very, very special journey in a human being's life.
Very good. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I have no idea how this time has gone. I had not prepped for any questions, but I am hoping that you find a great edit.
It was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.